Hey everybody, welcome back to the History Freak, and today we're going to be talking about arguably Henry VIII's most famous wife, Anne Boleyn. Anne is thought to have been born around 1501. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, was already a very well-established man at court and on extremely good terms with the king. She and her siblings, George and Mary, grew up at Hever Castle. Fun fact, the castle was later given to Henry's fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, as part of the settlement of the annulment of her marriage to Henry. At the age of 12, Anne went to the Netherlands to be part of Margaret of Austria's household. She then moved to the French court to be lady to Henry's younger sister Mary, who was Queen of France. After Mary's husband died, Anne became lady to the new French queen, Claude. Anne would have learned many important things being around so many powerful and important women. It's thought that it's here, in France, where she had her first experience with religious reformation and reading the Bible. In 1522, she left France and returned to England, where she would go on to become lady-in-waiting to the current queen, Catherine of Aragon. She became well known as a stylish woman around the court. She was also very intelligent, witty, and often the centre of attention. It's thought that Henry first noticed Anne around 1526. This is due to a letter written in 1527 where Henry says he's been in love for a year. Anne, however, refused to be Henry's mistress, as her older sister Mary had already done that and, as a result, had a terrible reputation. Fun fact, although the Boleyns that survived Anne's death would fall spectacularly from the top, Mary's own daughter Catherine would rise up again and eventually get a place at court as one of the ladies-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth. We don't know for sure what Anne looked like, as many of the well-known portraits were painted well after her death. Of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but Anne was described as being not beautiful, but charming, fashionable, intelligent, and charismatic, and all of this helped Henry fall deeply in love with her. Henry and Anne may have anticipated they would not have to wait a very long time to be married, but they were clearly wrong. And they didn't sleep together for 7 years. Although their relationship was not sexual, Anne was often at the king's side. Her influence became stronger, and this is clear in matters such as helping in the downfall of Cardinal Wolsey. Wolsey had been the king's chancellor, which was the highest position after the king, and he was extremely powerful. It shows what Anne was capable of in being part of Wolsey's downfall. Wolsey had actually worked tirelessly to achieve the king's annulment. This is of course something that Anne wanted, but despite this, she hated him. After years of failing to get his annulment, Henry took drastic action and made the decision to break with Rome and the Catholic faith, and he set up the Church of England with himself as the head. He could now finally get his way and marry Anne. His first wife Catherine would now be banished from court. Male subjects were even required to sign an oath, swearing to recognise Anne as the true queen. Years after falling in love, Anne was finally crowned Queen of England on the 1st of June 1533. She took part in an impressive procession through London, but the lack of crowds and positive reaction in the capital confirmed her lack of popularity. This got worse when she failed to deliver the wanted son and heir. It's thought she became pregnant 4 times, but like Catherine before her, she failed to deliver any living children, except for a single daughter from her first pregnancy, the Princess Elizabeth. Despite everything Henry had gone through with Catherine, and his huge efforts to marry Anne, he quickly started to go off her, and he started to become close to one of Anne's ladies, Jane Seymour. In 1536, Henry fell in a jousting accident. Anne, who was pregnant, miscarried the baby, and she said it was partly due to her concern for Henry after his fall. After failing to deliver a son once again, Henry now decided he had been tricked into the marriage. And this idea was likely supported by Anne's enemies, including his now Chancellor, Thomas Cromwell, who had argued with the Queen on religious matters. So why did Anne fall so badly? There are many theories for Anne's downfall. She certainly had many enemies, including Cromwell, also the Seymours, who were now seeing the rise of one of their own in Jane, and were possibly hoping she would in fact replace Anne as the Queen. Whether they were true or not, she was accused of many things, including conspiring the king's death, and this was treason. She was also accused of adultery with 5 men, including her brother. Under torture, one of these men, the musician Mark Smeaton, admitted to adultery with the Queen, but the other men all maintained their innocence. Another possible reason is Anne, it has been suggested, made negative statements about Henry, including that he was unsatisfying in bed. As Henry wanted to be portrayed as hyper-masculine, it was a terrible statement to make, and it made him look bad, which was a very risky thing to do. Some of these statements were even read out in Anne's trial. Anne has been accused of having 6 fingers on her right hand. Now, whether this was true or not, it was a very bad thing for people to believe. At the time, it was commonly thought that physical deformities represented evil acts committed by the individual. That's often why Richard III, for example, is portrayed as a hunchback in plays, because it reinforces the popular idea that he was a villain. In Anne's trial, her own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, as well as a man she had once been betrothed to, called Henry Percy, sat on the jury. She was found guilty and beheaded in the Tower of London just 4 days later. Before her death, Anne swore on confession she had never been unfaithful. It was said she died with courage and dignity. Anne is surely one of the most amazing and important women in British history. A king was so in love with her that he was prepared to change the religion of the country to marry her. She was also mother to Elizabeth, one of the most amazing monarchs in history, and I feel it's not just a coincidence that one amazing woman gave birth to another. Although Elizabeth was young when her mother was murdered, I feel she must have been inspired by the way her mother had lived and learnt important lessons to make her the great ruler she was. It makes me think, what kind of ruler could Anne herself have been if given the opportunity? Think, for example, if Henry had died in the jousting accident. Elizabeth would have become a child queen, and therefore her mother would have truly ruled through her as the true power. I think she may have been a very great ruler. But what do you think about Anne? Has she been remembered too favourably or too negatively? What do you think of the way the media portrays her? Do you think there was any truth to the accusations against her? And what could she have done differently to change her destiny? Comment down below any thoughts or questions about this video, and if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. And join us on our next video when we'll talk about Henry's 3rd wife, Jane Seymour. Ta-ta for now, history freaks.